Hare Krishna. So let us start with Isopanishad, verse 11. Vidyam cha avidyam cha yas tadvedo bhayam saha avidyaya mrityum tirtva vidyayamritam ashnute vidyam cha yas tadvedo bhayam saha avidyaya mrityum tirtva vidyayamritam ashnute. Only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of the repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. But since the creation of the material world, everyone has been trying to attain a permanent life. But the laws of nature are so cruel that no one has been able to avoid the hand of death. No one wants to die, nor does anyone want to become old or diseased. The law of nature, however, does not allow anyone immunity from old age, disease, or death, nor has the advancement of material knowledge solved these problems. Material science can discover the nuclear bomb to accelerate the process of death, but it cannot discover anything that can protect man from the cruel hands of old age, disease, and death. From the Puranas, we learn of the activities of Hiranyakashipu, a king who was very much advanced materially. Wanting to conquer cruel death by his material acquisitions and the strength of his nescience, he underwent a type of meditation so severe that the inhabitants of all the planetary systems became disturbed by his mystic powers. He forced the creator of the universe, the demigod Brahma, to come down to him. He then asked Brahma for the benediction of becoming Amar, by which one does not die. Brahma said that he could not award the benediction because he, the material creator, who rules all planets, is not Amar. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 8:17, Brahma lives a long time, but that does not mean he is immortal. Hiranya means gold and Kashipu means soft bed. This cunning gentleman Hiranyakashipu was interested in these two things, money and woman, and he wanted to enjoy them by becoming immortal. He asked from Brahma many benedictions in hopes of indirectly fulfilling his desire to become immortal. Since Brahma told him that he could not grant the gift of immortality, Hiranyakashipu requested that he not be killed by any man, animal, god, or any other living being within the 84 lakh species. He also asked that he does not die on land, in the air or water, or by any weapon. In this way, Hiranyakashipu foolishly thought These guarantees would save him from death. Ultimately, however, although Brahma granted him all these benedictions, he was killed by the personality of Godhead in the form of Narasimha, the Lord's half lion, half man incarnation. And no weapon was used to kill him, for he was killed by the Lord's nails. Nor was he killed on the land, in the air, or in the water, for he was killed in the lap of that wonderful living being, Narasimha, who was beyond his conception. The whole point here is that even Hiranyakashipu, the most powerful of the materialists, could not become deathless by his various plans. What then can be accomplished by the tiny Hiranyakashipus of today, whose plans are thwarted from moment to moment? Sri Isopanishad instructs us not to make one sided attempts to win the struggle for existence. Everyone is struggling hard for existence, but the laws of material nature are so hard and fast that they do not allow anyone to surpass them. In order to attain a permanent life, one must be prepared to go back to Godhead. The process by which one goes back to Godhead is a different branch of knowledge, and it has to be learned from the revealed Vedic scriptures, such as the Upanishads, the Vedanta Sutra, the Bhagavad Gita, and Srimad Bhagavatam. To be happy in this life and attain a permanent blissful life after leaving this material body, one must study this sacred literature and obtain transcendental knowledge. The conditioned living being has forgotten his eternal relationship with God and has mistakenly accepted this temporary place of his birth as all in all. The Lord has kindly delivered the above mentioned scriptures in India and other scriptures in other countries to remind the forgetful human being that his home is not here in this material world. The living being is a spiritual entity and he can be happy only by returning to his spiritual home. From his kingdom, the personality of Godhead sends his bona fide servants to propagate the message by which one can return to Godhead. And sometimes the Lord comes himself to do this work. Since all living beings are his beloved sons, his parts and parcels, God is more sorry than we ourselves to see the sufferings we are constantly undergoing in this material condition. जय श्री श्री निताई चांद गौचांद भगवान की जय श्री श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा महारानी कृष्ण महाराज श्री प्रभुपाद की जय. The miseries of this material world serve to indirectly remind us of our incompatibility with the dead man. Intelligent living entities generally take note of these reminders and engage themselves in the culture of Vidya or transcendental knowledge. Human life is the best opportunity for the culture of spiritual knowledge. And a human being who does not take advantage of this opportunity is called as a Naradma, the lowest of human beings. The path of avidya, or advancement of material knowledge for sense gratification, is a path of repeated birth and death. As he exists spiritually, the living entity has no birth or death. Birth and death apply to the outward covering of the spirit soul, the body. Death is compared to the taking off, and the birth to the putting on of the outward garments. Foolish human beings who are grossly absorbed in the culture of avidya, the science, do not mind this cruel process. Enamored with the beauty of the illusory energy, they undergo the same miseries repeatedly and do not learn any lessons from the laws of nature. Therefore, the culture of Vidya or transcendental knowledge is essential for the human being. Sense enjoyment in the diseased material condition must be restricted as far as possible. Unrestricted sense enjoyment in this bodily condition is the path of ignorance and death. The living entities are not without spiritual senses. Every living being in his original spiritual form has all the senses which are now materially manifested, being covered by the material body and mind. The activities of the material senses are perverted reflections of the activities of the original spiritual senses. In his diseased condition, the spirit soul engages in material activities under the material covering. Real sense enjoyment is possible only when the disease of materialism is removed. In our spiritual form, free from all material contamination, real enjoyment of the senses is possible. A patient must regain his health before he can truly enjoy sense pleasure again. Thus, the aim of human life should not be to enjoy perverted sense enjoyments, but to cure the material disease. Aggravation of material disease is no sign of knowledge, but a sign of avidya, ignorance. For good health, a person should not increase his fever from 105 degrees to 107 degrees, but should reduce his temperature to the normal 98.6. That should be the aim of human life. The modern trend of material civilization is to increase the temperature of the feverish material condition, which has reached the point of 107 degrees in the form of atomic energy. Meanwhile, the foolish politicians are crying that any moment the world may go to hell. That is the result of the advancement of material knowledge and the neglect of the most important part of life, the culture of spiritual knowledge. Sri Isopanishad herein warns that we must not follow this dangerous path leading to death. On the contrary, we must develop the culture of spiritual knowledge so that we may become completely free from the cruel hands of death. This does not mean that all the activities for the maintenance of the body should be stopped. There is no question of stopping activity, just as there is no question of wiping out one's temperature altogether when trying to recover from a disease. To make the best of a bad bargain is the appropriate expression. The culture of spiritual knowledge necessitates the help of the body and the mind. Therefore, the maintenance of body and the mind is required if we are to reach our goal. The normal temperature should be maintained at 98.6 degrees, and the great sages and saints of India have attempted to do this by a balanced program of spiritual and material knowledge. They never allow the misuse of human intelligence for diseased sense gratification. Human activities, diseased by a tendency towards sense gratification, have been regulated in the Vedas under the principles of salvation. This system employs religion, economic development, sense gratification, and salvation. But at the present moment, people have no interest in religion or salvation. They only have one aim in life, that is sense gratification, and in order to achieve this end, they make plans for economic development. Misguided men think that religion should be maintained because it contributes to economic development, which is required for sense gratification. Thus, in order to guarantee further sense gratification after death in heaven, there is some system of religious observance. But that is not the purpose of religion. The path of religion is actually meant for self realization. And economic development is required just to maintain the body in a sound, healthy condition. A man should lead a healthy life with a sound mind just to realize Vidya, true knowledge, which is the aim of human life. This life is not meant for working like an ass or for cultivating avidya for sense gratification. The path of Vidya is most perfectly presented in Srimad Bhagavatam, which directs a human being to utilize his life to inquire into the absolute truth. The absolute truth is realized step by step as Brahman, Paramatma, and finally Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. The absolute truth is realized by the broad minded man who has attained knowledge and detachment by following the 18 principles of Bhagavad Gita described in the purpose to Mantra 10. The central purpose of these 18 principles is the attainment of transcendental devotional service to the personality of Godhead. जय श्री निताई जय गौरचंद भगवान की जय श्री श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा महारानी सुदर्शन महाराज श्री प्रभुपाद की जय. Therefore, all classes of men are encouraged to learn the art of devotional service to the Lord. A guaranteed path to the aim of Vidya is described by Srila Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which we have presented in English as the nectar of devotion. The culture of Vidya is summarized in Srimad Bhagavatam in the following words: Tasmadekena manasa Bhagavan Sattvatam Pati Shrotavya Kirtitavyascha Dhyeya Pujyascha Nityada. Therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. Unless religion, economic development, and sense gratification aim towards the attainment of devotion and service of the Lord, they are simply different forms of nescience, as Sri Ishopanishad indicates in the following mantras. Only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. Srila Prabhupada begins the purport here by establishing that no one can remain immortal in this world. Everyone has to die. Rather, the modern day knowledge or modern day advancement is simply geared in the direction of accelerating our death, but it cannot stop it. Srila Prabhupada is giving the example of Hiranyakashipu, who is forcing Brahmaji to get the benediction of immortality so that he can enjoy the woman and money. But even though he thought he tricked Brahmaji in a very strong manner, he thought he tricked Brahmaji. But it didn't come to any good avail because he was killed like a wasp by Lord Narasimha. Now the point is that just like any material means, one cannot avoid death. The Prabhupada explains the same way one cannot avoid old age, and one cannot avoid the invalidity of the old age, and one cannot avoid the disease. Neither one can avoid disease, nor one can avoid old age. One can, neither one can avoid the death. In the same way, in this material world, one cannot avoid experiencing misery and anxiety. It is impossible. It's like if one is in the ocean, one cannot avoid being wet. The same way, one cannot avoid. So one is drowning in the ocean. One cannot avoid being wet. There is all around water. Everywhere there is water. Similarly, everywhere there is dukha layer. Anything we touch, it will potentially give us misery, anxiety. That is unavoidable. So, so therefore, the point which comes is that one should not uh, The goal of life is not how to remain happy in this world, in this life. But the goal of the life begins from the point that we are not meant for this material world, and therefore one should transcend towards the spiritual realm. Tamasoma Jyotirgame, Mrityurma Amritam Game. So therefore the problem is not why there are problems in this material world, but the actual problem is why are we sleeping in this material world? Why problems are there in this material world? That is not the problem. But the problem is why are we there in the material world? That is the problem. The material world is a place for problems. Just like dustbin is a place of waste and garbage. So if one is in the dustbin area of the town, and then one is crying and one is cribbing and complaining about the garbage all around and the stench and the smell and the unhygienic ambience all around, that complaint has no meaning because the garbage is I mean, the dustbin is the place of garbage. With the dustbin area, not the garbage area. That's a place for garbage. So one cannot complain about garbage there because that is the allotted place of garbage of the whole city. It is the allotted place of garbage. Similarly, problems have to be kept in some bin, and that bin is called as material world. What is the problem in understanding that? So therefore, if one is in the material world and complaining of the misery, it is just like a person visiting the garbage area of the city and then complaining of the garbage. The problem is not garbage because that is the allotted area of the garbage. The problem is what is the person doing in that area. Just like every hospital has a mortuary. If one goes in the night with his chattai to sleep in the mortuary, one will feel fearful. One will feel horrified. One says, "Oh, why there is so much of fear all around this place?" No, that is the allotted place for the dead bodies. What are you as a living person doing in the dead body room? That is the question. So therefore, the Shastras say that don't try to box, don't try to box around with the problems which are coming in your world, in your life. That way, we are wasting our life. This is the allotted place for problems. This is the garbage area. This is the mortuary. What is misfit is we don't have anything to give and take with this material. And that is why Srila Prabhupada is explaining that the spirit soul, part and parcel of Krishna, and the spirit soul is Sachidananda. And the spirit soul has all the spiritual senses, whose all the spiritual senses, so all the senses which we see, the body and the mind manifesting, the spirit soul has all of them. So in fact, these replicas of the body and the mind, they actually act in a perverted direction. That is the point. They actually act in this perverted direction. So one has to give that up because that's perverted. One has to give that up because it's perverted. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada makes a point that generally people are interested in the Vedic time. The people were interested in the religion for economic development and self gratification. That's required self gratification, and then achieve liberation. Nowadays, the problem is that people are not interested in religion and salvation. They're only interested in sense gratification and economic development. Sense gratification. And that is what expedites or expedites the misery coefficient of one's life. Because one is only having the material skills, accolades, knowledge in one's hand, and that is very deadly. So this mantra, Isopanishad, is revealing us that we need both spiritual and material, both in our hands. Spiritual knowledge, the knowledge of science, the knowledge of science, knowledge in the science. So awareness and knowledge both are required for a meaningful life. Now one may say, oh, if the material knowledge is very lethal and very nonsensical and very poisonous and toxic, then why at all we need it? That Srila Prabhupada is explaining, because the Srila Prabhupada is saying that now to be able to serve the Supreme Lord, the service to the Krishna requires or necessitates the help and support of the body and the mind. That is the point. And therefore, the material knowledge serves its best utility, most constructive and auspicious utility, when the material assets and material knowledge are used as a means to drive the spiritual knowledge forward. So spiritual knowledge is like the wealth, and material knowledge and material skills are like the means to invest this wealth, and thereby one can increase the wealth. So therefore, material knowledge and material skills and accolades are very good and auspicious only when they are subservient or to the spiritual knowledge. The spiritual knowledge sets a vision, and the material knowledge acts as a support to sustain and further that spiritual wealth. Rather, Srila Prabhupada is explaining here that one actually cannot give up the pursuit, the material activities per se. Just like Prabhupada is giving the example of temperature, that a healthy temperature of the body is 98.6 Celsius, I believe. Celsius. 19.6 Fahrenheit or Celsius. Uh, 98 Fahrenheit. Okay, Fahrenheit. But when one is diseased, one may go to 103, 105, 107. Srila Prabhupada is explaining modern world is already at 107 with atomic energy being produced and all that. So the mission is to reduce the fever of material desires, of material attachments. Therefore, sense control serves to regain a person's health because the fever reduces. The fever reduces is a very good sign. The health is restored. So many times people say that okay, in this material world we are bound. Yes, One of the ways by which the living entity is bound in the today's world is because of fever a person becomes bound. Because the person is weak, is not moving only. What degrees of freedom one is not able to exercise only. But when one regains one's health, automatically one can move around. So the degrees of freedom one can unleash upon, and thus a person becomes free and liberated. But even Mukta Suchita. So that stage only comes because just by regaining one's health. Because the health is not there, so the disease condition, one cannot sit, one cannot walk. The degrees of freedom are not at all manifest. Although they are there, one doesn't have the energy to open them. So therefore, the bondage, if you see from this perspective, the bondage is due to feverishness. That is why, that is how we can understand how the material desires create bondage. So the material desire increases the fever, and a person in fever, as the fever increases, one cannot move, one cannot stand, one cannot sit, one just lie down like a vegetable. That's it. What can one do? Only one can wait. One can take medication and then wait to get cured. And when it's cured, one can run, one can jump, one can dance. A lot of freedom. That is Jivan. For devotee of the Lord gets liberated. This is how the devotee of the Lord gets liberated. So therefore, Prabhupada is explaining that the material disease only has to be, I mean, the material temperature, body temperature only has to be reduced up to 98.6. That's it. This is what Sri Isopanishad Mantra 1 also talks about. Ishavasyamidam sarvam yat kincham jagatyan jagat. You cannot give it up completely. So you just be happy with whatever quota Lord has set aside. Agradakasya siddhanam. Don't dare to encroach upon others' quota. Then one will get a tight reaction from the material. So not that one has to give up maintaining the body and the mind. One has to give up everything. But one has to ensure that material knowledge is only used as a means to fulfill the directionality set by the spiritual knowledge. The other way around is going to be demoniac. See, the other way around, Hiranyakashipu was doing that. He was using the spiritual knowledge when he was preaching to his brother's wives after his brother died. He was using spiritual principles to further his lusty, greedy, demoniac attitude. See, the spirit is demoniac. So, the other way around, material knowledge has to be subservient to the spiritual knowledge. The material plane should only give one the support so that one can climb on the spiritual. That is the only usage of the material plane. Otherwise, there is no.
What?
Yes. So, therefore, the Shastras describe that whatever we have should be always utilized for the purpose of furthering Krishna consciousness. Ishwara Goswamis, they were all very intelligent, very great scholars, highly skilled. They were so skilled. Nawab Hussain Shah was dying to get them. At any cost, he wanted to get them. The Rupa Sanatan Goswami and Sri Vallabha, Anupa. He was dying to get them, and at any cost, because he felt that he cannot fulfill all his material plans without them. He cannot run the kingdom without them. They were so skilled, but their heart was to cut off. They were forced to serve Nawab Hussain Shah at that time because of the threats of the Nawab Hussain Shah against the Vaishnava community. But in the heart of the hearts, they wanted to leave it. So what happened when they left it? Did they give up everything material? No, that same intelligence scholarship they applied in establishing the science of bhakti. नाना शास्त्र विचार नहीं निपुनो सद्धर्म संस्थापको लोकानां हितकारिणो त्रिभुवने मन्यो शरण्याकरो वंदे रूप सनातन रघुयुग श्रीजीव गोपाल को. So they were very scrutinizingly studying the Shastras. They established the science of bhakti. And they promoted and revealed the very Brajadham, the very pastimes of the Lord. And they were preaching to thousands of people. And they engaged so well different people in serving the Lord. And therefore, they got such beautiful temples made, like Sri Radha Madan Mohan Mandir, Sri Radha Damodar, Radha Govinda Mandir. The very powerful temples they got made. So everything they got it done. They utilize their skills for the purpose of serving Krishna. So this is an example for us. That and then the Shastra explain how to do that. The Shastra explain. See, the point is that the Shastra explain the way how one can how one can uplift one's intelligence to be able to serve Krishna, one's consciousness to be able to serve Krishna, how one can uplift one's consciousness so that it is soaked in Krishna. The Shastras explain how it is done. The Shastras say for one's own sustenance, one should never worry about it. Tarabha kim na jivanti, shastra kim na bhasyudah, na khadanti na mehanti, kim jnani prashavo pare. Do the trees not live? Do the bellows not breathe? This life simply for the sake of eating and sense enjoyment based on six life. See, when animals are doing kim grame pashavu pare, what good one has done better than the animals? And therefore, one's sustenance should not be a worry, because when sustenance is a worry, then it will sap away all our time, all our life, and one will not be able to think of any higher subject matter. So therefore, when one saves one's consciousness from getting into the groove of worrying about one's own maintenance, then that consciousness starts getting channelized towards transcendence. And then only we will see that our intelligence is going to be used uh, for furthering the pleasure of the Lord. for supporting or bringing about the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. That is the point. Kim gramo pashuvo. And then only we can follow in the footsteps of the Goswamis. But one may say, oh, the modern world, everything is obtained with so much difficulty. So how one need not worry about oneself. The Shastras say, if you aim for the materially, if you are happy and satisfied with just keeping the body and the mind together, I mean the body and the soul, the body and the soul together for executing Krishna consciousness, if one is satisfied doing that, that much will come. If one is busily engaged in Krishna service, that much will come. But if one wants more, then one has to work hard for it. The purpose factors will start, one's whole consciousness and one's whole life will get lost in that pursuit. Means one will not be able to get time and space to be able to offer one's consciousness, canalize one's consciousness and activities towards the Supreme Lord. So therefore, but if one is satisfied with just the body and the mind, and the body and the soul together, that much will come automatically. Then one is saved from the clutches of the worry or the anxiety about one's own sustenance, and thus one can dive deeper and absorb and soak one's consciousness in remembrance of Krishna and in assisting in the mission, being absorbed in assisting in the mission of the Supreme Lord. So that is a way how the two can go together. The nescience just becomes a support to establish and enhance the transcendental science. Let us stop here for today. Hare Krishna. श्री शुभनिषद की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय।